Welcome. Welcome to today's show from hell. Uh, 90 degrees here, 50% humidity, people stabbing each other in the meat department at Ralph's. It's going on for a long time. When long heat waves go on, the James Elroy novels become nonfiction textbooks. Um, Fascinating show today about a personal friend of mine. Richard Lewis passed away last year. I'm getting a little spilkus already. 'Cause it's kind of weird because, like, he passed away, but I still haven't mourned his loss. So maybe this will help, just going into the archives to find out my mental and physical archives to find out about Richard or remember Richard has kicked up just story after story after story of me and related to Richard. As many of these episodes, you will see that there is a personal element to the situation. Happy New Year to Richard Lewis, wherever he is in Jewish heaven, if there is one, um, and the rest of my friends out there in New Year's land. The show needs you, for reasons that I don't understand, to subscribe to the channel. Thank you, Mike Schaefer. Show them how to do it. It's not complicated. Mike started doing this when he was 5, subscribing to shows. He knows how to do it. Some of you may not be aware. There's a button somewhere. You push the subscribe and like button. Apparently, the like button has something to do with it. YouTube now rearranging their algorithms after pressure from people from above. Nevertheless, this channel seems to be doing fairly well compared to what I don't know, but we seem to be pulling in quite a few viewers to these. Hi, Catherine. Um, the show seems to, I don't know, people enjoy it. These are really quasi. I'm autistic. I don't know. Yeah, either do I. So I'm not even autistic, and I don't understand it. But I stopped taking Tylenol this week for obvious reasons. Yeah, Richard Lewis, subscribe, like. First, we got to do something with the sponsors who are sponsoring this show for reasons, again, that I don't understand. Builtong USA, the secret code is Mark G. Let me see where here's my stash. This is my personal stash. You're not getting any of it. This is my favorite. Is it a flavor? I don't even know what you call it. I don't know if it's a flavor, but it's my favorite taste among the Biltong flavors that he has. Absolutely delicious, folks. I mean, I will sit on the couch eating this, watching the Dodger game, waiting for the playoffs, which will begin Tuesday, and that'll spiral me into an incredible dark hole of a month or maybe shorter of playoffs of complete tension. And I need this. Bill Kinnison, your show soon. He's hot about your Sam show. I don't know what that means, but thank you, Nasty Meal. Um, we're trying to dig deep on these people, and we're trying to come up with the facts and secrets about their lives as I have learned them personally and through research. But yeah, Biltong USA, 10% off, secret code, Mark G. There's plenty of other stuff on the menu if you want to take a look at it. Anton has put together a wonderful menu of various Biltong tastes and also desserts. And go to it, use the secret code, Biltong USA, biltongusa.com. Just order one. And I think you'll understand how delicious this is because as you get older, you need more protein, okay? And the muscle mass starts declining, and there's nothing you could do about it except lift weights 24/7 and or eat tons of protein. So I have opted for some weightlifting and nonstop protein and fiber eating. This is my protein source, along with eggs and cheese and chicken. But this really helps, and I think for people out there who are looking for a protein source that tastes great, you could go to biltongusa.com and you will find what you're looking for. Order just one, and you will see that you'll be addicted like I am. So, and now on with the show. Um, where do we start with Richard Lewis? There's a bunch of personal stories. Obviously, we'll get to them. Um, but Richard Lewis is born like in 1947 in Brooklyn. They quickly moved to like Englewood, New Jersey. His dad, yeah, this is look at that pudgy punum of a face. I don't know what he's holding there. It looks like a giant coconut. But they moved to from Brooklyn to Englewood because his dad, Bill Lewis, is the proprietor of a huge catering firm called Ambassador Catering. And that begins to cater all these different things in New Jersey, maybe in New York, maybe across the river also. Here's a picture of his dad holding Richard. Richard there looks like he's about 3 or something. And one of his complaints was his dad was never home. I mean, but that's every kid's complaint because the dad was a workaholic making a lot of money. They did not live in poverty. They had a big suburban house. He had 2 older siblings. He had this brother, uh, Bob. And yeah, I just love that shot of the dad. He had a brother, Bob. This is Bob on the left. Look at Richard. He looks almost, he looks almost, I don't want to say autistic, but he's got a certain look. The sister, these were Siamese triplets, by the way, to people who didn't know that. It was possibly the first case of Siamese triplets in New Jersey during that decade. Um, this must be like 19, I want to say it looks too, 1950. No, it's probably 1948, as oddly as that seems. And there's his older brother, Bob, who was 6 years older than him, and then his sister was older than him, obviously as well. So there's a big gap, 9 and 6. They both moved out of the house, and Richard said that he was left alone with his mother for the rest of his life. This is a great photo. I don't know what Richard's complaining about. There's a photo of his father and his mother down in Florida. That's Blanche Goldberg Lewis on the right and Bill Lewis on the left. I think from this picture, you can safely say that they were swingers in the 70s. At least that's my take. I don't know. His mother got into dinner theater and started to do Neil Simon plays. She was very harsh to him. For Christmas, he told me he bought her a self complaining oven one year and also a remote controlled wailing wall for Hanukkah. Um, he said they used to play pin the blame on the donkey at his birthday parties. But one of the books he claimed they read as a child rearing book was called Spare the Joy Child Raising by Dice. These are, of course, jokes that Richard would put into his act. But his parents, what can I say? I mean, one of my favorite jokes of Richard Lewis of all time was they were in the car in the driveway and they're all packed to go across the country from New Jersey to the West Coast. And his father hears this jangling sound and he keeps saying, "What is that? What is that?" And his mother says, "I've got the change ready for the Golden Gate Bridge." It was one of my favorite Richard Lewis jokes of all time, and only he could tell it much better than me. But um, I didn't know Richard Lewis in 1989 when I went to Carnegie Hall to see him at two sold out shows at Carnegie Hall in 1989. I only saw one of them, and they were both, accordingly to him, spectacular. But getting back to his family and his obsession with Hollywood, he told me he once in the span of a week because it was on $1 Million Movie. He watched the film Yankee Doodle Dandy with James Cagney 27 times. I don't know what he saw in that film other than it was on 2 or 3 times a day on some sort of television station. Um, and he got hooked on this film, Yankee Doodle Dandy, for some reason. Um, he begins to go to college. He goes to high school in New Jersey in this, fairly middle class high school, and he does very well there. And he goes to Ohio State University, where he majors in. This is his high school, yeah, in New Jersey. I forget the name of it, but oh yeah, Dwight Morrow. What am I saying? Right there, and it's not Edward R. Morrow, and it's not Dwight Morrow is some local guy. This school will later become mostly a black school due to busing in the '70s, but I think he was out of there by then. Um, yeah, this is a great picture. I don't know who the guy on the right is, but the guy on the left, oh, it's some guy, Phil Ossoff, obviously on the right, but some friend of his. But that's Richard Lewis at basketball camp. He was a big basketball player at the time, and obviously a sports freak, stickball player, and a bunch of other things. He was a diehard Brooklyn Dodger fan, and his age puts him on the cusp of the Dodgers being in Brooklyn and then leaving for Los Angeles. Uh, but he also told me he was addicted to Vin Scully, the announcer, which we'll get to a little later. Vin Scully was kind of something or some voice to him that could calm him down and put him to sleep at night, listening to Vinny call a game, which is absolutely true. He was not wrong about that. And Richard and I will go to various Dodger games together, and that's a story by itself. But he gets a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Ohio State in 1969. So he's already getting out of college in 1969, and the '60s have basically gone by. And keep in mind, he doesn't drink or do drugs or anything in college. Basically, a pretty sheltered guy, and has a couple of friends, and is not that much of a party guy. But in 1972, I think a couple of years later, he comes back to New York, and he comes back to the East Coast, and he begins working on trying to become a comic, and he's working these odd jobs. He's working at the Museum of Art as a research assistant, somebody who's up in the library. He's working at like a Kinko's kind of place, and he's working like another job, all to pay the rent. And he meets a guy named David Brenner. And David Brenner, who is already an established comic at this time, Richard is going to like open mic nights at Catch and other places. And he meets David Brenner. And David Brenner, there's a shot of David Brenner on the right. David Brenner becomes his rabbi. I don't mean legally his rabbi, I mean his rabbi, show business rabbi. And at one point, he goes to David Brenner, and he can't get the request out of his mouth. And David Brenner says, "What is it? What do you want?" David Brenner from Philadelphia, by the way, his grandfather and father, I think, were in vaudeville. This guy's got show business in his blood. We'll do an episode on David Brenner at one point. But David Brenner says, "What is your problem?" And he starts stammering, Richard, and he can't really get out the request. And he says, "I have to work these odd jobs and I can't focus on comedy." And David Brenner takes out his checkbook and writes him a check, which basically allows Richard Lewis to quit all his day jobs and focus on comedy. And he is forever in debt emotionally to David Brenner for that. He, in college, listens to Lenny Bruce live at Berkeley. And this album convinces him that he has to become a stand up comic. And he kind of models himself after Lenny Bruce. And maybe there's a picture. Here's a cover of the album. And there's many different covers of it, but it's a live album at Berkeley, California, by Lenny Bruce. I think I want to say 65. I forget, it might have been a little earlier than that. 65? Maybe it was earlier than that. Um, but the album, I think, came out later. But anyway, so he begins to worship Lenny Bruce, and he begins to try to put together a stand-up career doing impressions like everyone else. And he went to camp with a guy at the age of 12, and you saw that camp there. Went to a camp at Cornwall on the Hudson, and I don't know if it was a Jewish camp or not, but he went to this camp, and one of the camp members was a guy named Larry David, and they became arch nemesises immediately at the camp. For some reason, they didn't hit it off, and they began to have a feud. And 10 years later, both of them are in comedy clubs. I think they're about 22, 23 years of age because they were the same age. And Richard Lewis and Larry David compare notes, and Richard Lewis and Larry David realize that they were the two at this summer camp. And they become friends and begin doing stand up together. Richard Lewis obviously propels past Larry David in the art of stand up. But one, yeah, this is later. There's a great photo. There's also a younger one. I don't know if you have that. There's one in their 20s where I think they're at like the Playboy Club, and Larry's got a full head of hair. The two of them, he's got like a cigarette in his mouth. Yeah, this one I love. This is great. There's Larry David on the right, Richard Lewis with a cigarette. I don't remember him smoking, but he's probably about 22 years of age here. Had great hair. Obviously, Larry David, cross-eyed and had bad hair. But they make a pact, and I'll just tell you this because we'll revisit it later. They make a pact that whoever, when they're both in show business, if one of them needs help financially, the other one has to agree to help out the other one for any amount that the person who is asking requests. Remember that promise. It's like a blood oath that the two of them make together. And Larry David lived in a 4-story walk up around the corner from the Improv, just to be close to the comedy club. And Richard basically went to the Improv, which was on 43rd and Ninth, which is kind of where I lived in Hell's Kitchen, and kind of where I later lived in Manhattan Plaza. And my uncle's coffee shop, if you've seen that episode, was on 42nd and Ninth. Shelley's Coffee Shop. There's an episode on the other channel just about that. But Richard Lewis, in 1973, sees a movie called The Long Goodbye with Elliot Gould. It's a Robert Altman film. And there's another female femme fatale in that named Nina Van Pallant, the Baroness, as they called her, because she was married to a baron. She was Danish, blonde, and a baroness. The guy later died and left her, I want to say, with 2 kids. And this is her with Elliot Gould. She will become a long-running Richard Lewis love interest for about over 4 years. A little bit later on, he sees the movie, and then years later actually meets her, and they become lovers. She played the female pimp in American Gigolo, if anybody remembers that, with Richard Gere. But anyway, so Richard's influences are Lenny Bruce, Woody Allen, Buster Keaton, and Richard Pryor. Now, the Buster Keaton thing is really bizarre because he goes to London, he goes to Europe in between semesters at college, and he goes around Europe for a summer vacation, and they're having a Buster Keaton Film Festival. And he goes for 12 consecutive days. I guess it was spread out, the film festival, which is like maybe a movie a day or something. And he becomes addicted to Buster Keaton. I never really understood the addiction. I'm not discrediting Buster Keaton, but I never understood his obsession with Buster Keaton. But he would get into these things where he would watch these films like Yankee Doodle Dandy and these Buster Keaton films, and then just become obsessed with them. He had a lot of obsessions. And these films were part of that obsession. And he will then begin to work on his own act. And at one point, the act is not really completely solid. He was in Miami, and one of his and he's bombing in Miami, North Miami Beach. And he's bombing that night, and one of his heroes is sitting at the front row. And that's why he's bombing, because he keeps looking at this guy, and it's Jackie Gleason. The legendary comedian Ralph Cramden, The Honeymooners, The Jackie Gleason Show, Away We Go. And Gleason is just looking at him drunk, and Gleason's got 2 girls with him. And Richard starts bombing, and Gleason comes up and takes the microphone out of his hand and says, "Let me show you how it's done, kid," and then does 20 minutes of comedy, gives it back to Richard Lewis, and the bombing continues. He's used that instead of spiraling into a black hole. He used it to reinvigorate himself and to really focus on the work that he would never bomb again and allow that to happen. It really was a big deal to him. I didn't know how big it was. Um, he viewed comedy, his comedy, as deeply as Jewish as you could possibly be. When he got the show Anything But Love with Jamie Lee Curtis, in the first episode, he plays a guy. This is him on the left with Jamie Lee Curtis and one of the other players on there. It's a magazine. He's an editor. She comes on as a research assistant. It's really a great sitcom. It ran for 4 years, never made into syndication, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I don't know if people liked it or watched it, but I loved Anything But Love. And there's one scene where they're on a train together, and she's sleeping above him in a bunk, the bunk in the train, and he can't fall asleep. And he said, "I try to count sheep, but I'm allergic to wool." He said, "I think I'm going to count Valium," and he goes 5 milligram, 10 milligram, 15 milligram, and falls asleep. Um, it's a pretty good sitcom, and I think he thought it would get into syndication, which it doesn't. And he will, when it's canceled. This is just jumping ahead a little bit. When it gets canceled in 1993, I think it was, um, he calls up Larry David and tries to invoke the sacred clause. And Larry David at that point has a lot of money. So he says, "Remember our sacred pact that we made?" And Larry David said, "Of course I do." And he said, "Well, my show just got canceled, Anything But Love, as you may be aware, and my cash flow has ended. I need some money. And of course, I'll pay you back." And Larry David says, "No problem." He says, "How much do you need?" And he says, "I need $1 million." And Larry David goes, "What?" He says, "Yeah, I need $1 million just to float me through what I'm going through now and everything else." So Larry David doesn't really buckle. He says, "Let me ask my wife, and I just want to clear it with her." And Richard's not happy about it because there was no wives made in the secret pact. And he comes back maybe a day or two later, and he tells Richard Lewis that he can't do it because his wife said no. And this begins a feud where they don't speak until the year 1999. So I think it's a 6 or 7 year feud of no talking to each other. But in 1979, Richard Lewis does a diary of a young comic, which is a satire on a comic moving out to LA to get into the entertainment business. Uh, yeah, here's a picture of it. It was produced by Lorne Michaels, and it was a TV movie, and it had a lot of weird people in it. Stacy Keach was in it. Dom DeLuise, Bill Macy plays Richard's father. Georgie Jessel was in it. Absolutely terrible. Produced by Lorne Michaels, but it's a movie. What can you say? Um, he does Diary of a Young Comic in 1985. He does his first Showtime special, which was called "I'm in Pain." He will later become the King of Pain. But backtracking to 1976, this is a weird story. There was a show on TV called the Sonny and Cher Show, and Richard Lewis, as part of his one of his straight jobs, survival jobs, he gets a gig as an extra on that music variety show, the Sonny and Cher Show. And in one of the musical sketches, he's playing, among other fruits, a stalk of celery. And he's dancing around as a stalk of celery and completely spirals into a black hole. And he rips off the celery costume and storms off the set. And the producer of the show says, "You'll never work in Hollywood again." And Richard responds, as a vegetable or stalk of celery. I hope not, and splits. And this was really a bottom for him because here he was, he had these aspirations and he's playing a stalk of celery on TV and in the background. And look, every one of these people, for the most part, had to do jobs like that, And I think that was the one that really hit a bottom for him, But he reinvigorates himself. The guy is a dog of war. He's the most ambitious, neurotic, self-centered, narcissistic, anorexic person I ever knew. Um, of those comics in the era, Richard told me that he only liked Bill Hicks and Sam Kinison. Um, he didn't really mention any other comics other than Kinison and Hicks. He really liked them, and obviously Pryor and Bruce, as I said before. But he begins to seek out all these different old comics. He finds Jonathan Winters up in the Hollywood Hills, and he goes and visits him repeatedly. He finds Phyllis Diller in the Hollywood Hills and befriends her, visits her repeatedly. He calls up Jerry Lewis in Las Vegas, who he doesn't know, and he just goes, Jerry Lewis, and Jerry Lewis goes, yeah. He said, Jerry Lewis, Richard Lewis, Richard Lewis, Jerry Lewis, Lewis Lewis, and Jerry Lewis goes some kind of a nut, just slams the phone down on Richard Lewis and just hangs up. He was obsessed. He was obsessed on a lot of things, but he was obsessed with showbiz royalty for sure. And he befriends Sally Marr. Sally Marr was the mother of Lenny Bruce. Sally Marr was in vaudeville. She was a performer herself. She was a hustler. Lenny Bruce perceived her to be a normal Jewish mother, and she started, at the end of her life, started to get a lot of money out of him, and as she did out of Sam Kinison. At the end, speaking of Kinison, and he also befriends Buster Keaton's wife, and he takes her out. She's like 70 years old, and he's dating and wining and dining Buster Keaton's wife or widow. Really strange stuff. Um, but in we get to like between 82 and 1993, does like 48 episodes of David Letterman. I mean, he was on Letterman so much. Letterman loved him, and he had him on so many times. He was on with, obviously, he was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He was on with Jay Leno, but Letterman really put him on the national map. I don't know if we have a picture of that right there with that pretty young lady sitting next to him. Oh, this is the Leno one. Yeah, this is one on NBC. Um, he starts dating a girl named Sean Young, who is an actress in a movie that he's in called Once Upon a Crime. I believe that may be where they met with John Candy. It's a comedy heist picture. Um, Maybe they met there. I don't know. This is a picture of them. Yeah, here's Richard Lewis with Sean Young. Sean Young, a little crazy, alcoholic at the time. I hope she's alive. I mean, I don't know. She had so many different incidents around town of acting out. But after Richard broke up with her, he told me something really funny that she left a dead cat on his doorstep. He opened it up, and there was a dead cat from her. If that means anything to anybody. Um, but yeah, he had a bunch of different relationships, and most of them did not end well. The Nina Van Palant one, she had a couple of kids, and he didn't want to be the father to the kids, so he broke that thing up intentionally um, to his own depression and her depression. 1988, he does an HBO special called I'm Exhausted. 1990 does I'm Doomed, also for HBO, and then Magical Misery Tour in 97 for HBO. Like I said, the Anything But Love gets canceled after 56 episodes, which leads us up to 89, the Carnegie Hall show, which I was at. I remember being in the men's room, and in comes Doc Severinsen, and he's wearing like a nudie suit with rhinestones, his white jumpsuit, and he's completely bombed out of his mind, and he's pissing on the side of the urinal, hitting people with his urine stream. I don't remember what I said to him, but Doc Severinsen was there from the Tonight Show, and Richard. Yeah, here's a picture of Richard in front of the poster from the Carnegie Hall show. He gave me a copy of that poster and he signed it. And yeah, here's my copy of it actually that's in my living room. And up there in the corner, I don't know if we can read what it says, but here's, here's me reenacting. Here's me reenacting the previous Richard Lewis photo with the same shirt. If I ever needed a Joe Ansis, you're the guy. You're truly one of the authentic minds I have ever known, and thankfully, fucking up, more fucked up than me. I love you like a brother and a patient, Richard Lewis. Yeah, we had a pretty close relationship. It was very interesting at times, and like Richard had with other people. It could be contentious, and it could be sibling rivalry kind of stuff. Um, that concert, he came out with. He used to come out with rolls of paper, and they were taped together. Maybe 20 or 30 of them taped together, and he'd roll them up. He'd put them in his pocket, and then he would unroll them. And there was a piano there, and the piano was there not because he was going to play the piano. He actually had union guys bringing a piano to the displeasure of the promoter, so he could lay out his notes on top of the piano, and then he would go over and lean over the piano, have a drink of water, and he would look at these bullet points on the notes of where he was going with the show. And it would literally roll down to the floor. And they were just bullet points to remind him, because he would just go off on these insane tangents into outer space, while he was performing. And keep in mind, at this point in his career, he's doing a lot of gets into meth and coke in the late '80s into the '90s, and drinking. The drinking, he drank champagne for the most part, but the meth and coke may have done a lot of damage to him. He said that another girlfriend who was breaking up with him, erased the VHS recording of the Carnegie Hall show, the only copy he had. And this haunted him to the day he died, because there was no record of that show. And in a lot of ways, I was a record of that show to him because I was there. And he would ask me about it repeatedly, and I would try to tell him, what I knew about it and remembered from it. Um, and he killed that night. He just destroyed the earth. Um, 1993, he hooks up with Mel Brooks and does Robin Hood Men in Tights, playing Prince John. I know a lot of you people love that movie. It's one of my favorites, with Richard in a costume comedy drama. Um, and it is a very, very funny movie. He also does, yeah, there he is as Prince John. Some of this stuff cracks me up. In 1993, he also does 13 episodes of a show called Daddy Dearest with Don Rickles. And Don Rickles plays his father in this show. Frank Sinatra shows up on this thing. He plays a therapist, Richard Lewis, and it ran 13 episodes. And Don Rickles was old school Vegas Borscht Bell comedy. Wasn't from the Richard Lewis school. It really was oil and water for these two comedy celebrities. And Richard Lewis was drinking heavily at the time, and he realized that when Don Rickles was in rehearsal, that his dressing room was open, and Richard Lewis snuck in there and he started stealing the vodka that Don Rickles kept in there, which he didn't drink. Don Rickles, he had it there for guests, like afterwards, and Richard Lewis kept stealing the vodka. And Rickles came up to him, and Rickles was not a fuzzy and warm guy. And he said, "If you ever steal vodka from me again, anything out of my fucking dressing room, I'll have your legs and arms broken by professional people." And if you think I'm kidding, just fucking try me, you piece of shit. And it scares the hell out of Richard Lewis because Rickles was not kidding around. And this makes the show very difficult to work with him and Rickles after that. I think that might have been the death knell to the show because he was terrified of Don Rickles. The Don Rickles that you see playing that casino manager in Martin Scorsese's Casino may indeed be the real Don Rickles as opposed to the comedy Don Rickles. So in 1991 and 1994, the alcoholism gets so bad, or the alcoholic drinking gets so bad, and the drug abuse gets so bad that he quits doing stand up. I mean, the road, like 91 to 94, but he's still working. He does in 1994. He does Wagons East, which is a West satire of the old West. Let me see. Yeah, here he is. Here's a poster of it. They came, they saw, they changed their minds. Him and John Candy. And what happens after this film or in post production is John Candy dies. And we're going to do an episode on John Candy, so I don't want to go that deep on John Candy at this time. But this has a profound effect on him, Richard Lewis, that is, because he's so close to John Candy that in 1994 they do an intervention on Richard Lewis in New York, really a professional intervention. And he is sent to rehab where I think he bolts within 18 hours, if I remember correctly, of being sent to rehab. But it plants a seed in him that he's got to get help. And he finds some people to help him out here in Hollywood. And that's where I come into the story, oddly enough. But anyway, in 1995, we'll get back to that. He kind of scared the shit out of himself and needed to get sober. 1995, he does a film called Drunks with Parker Posey, Faye Dunaway, Diane Wiest, Callista Flockhart, Spalding Gray is in this movie. It's a low budget indie film shot by the Shooting Gallery in New York. And he's the star of the movie. And he plays an alcoholic who keeps leaving recovery and going out again. And it's not that far fetched. He will then be in Leaving Las Vegas, the Nick Cage movie with Elizabeth Shue, a fantastic movie where Nicolas Cage is reenacting. Here's Richard Lewis on the right, and he's playing Nicolas Cage's agent. This is in a restaurant in Hollywood where Nick Cage is drunk at the very beginning of the movie and borrows money from Richard Lewis. And Richard Lewis tells him not to ever ask him for money again. And then the Nick Cage character goes to Las Vegas to drink himself to death. He's a screenwriter who is working at a company, gets fired, and decides that he's going to take the bonus severance check and over the span of 4 weeks kill himself by drinking. And that's the movie. And Nicolas Cage is amazing. It's almost like the Anti-Drunks. It's like a real movie where Nicolas Cage is trying to do or is doing what Richard Lewis was trying to do. And the difference is enormous when you see them back to back. Now, in 1998, he meets a girl at a record release party for Ringo Starr. A woman who works at the label. I don't know if it was Warner Brothers. I forget which label it was. But it was a record release party. And he will eventually marry her in 2005. He meets her in Joyce Lipinski. Here's a picture of Joyce. She was a doll. She still is a doll. And she was married to Richard from 2005. From 2005 to the end of his life. He lived in this house on Laurel Canyon, Richard. The house was not even a house. It was a museum. And in that house was rock and roll memorabilia, his own memorabilia. Here's Joyce. She realized she couldn't live in the house. There was no room for her in the house. And they got a house in the valley and moved out to the valley at one point because Richard had a couple of spills down the stairs there. But, I remember going over to Rich's house and he would He ordered a pizza, and he ordered the pizza, and the pizza comes, and I begin to eat the pizza, and I say, "You gonna have any of the pizza?" And he said, "No, I'm just gonna watch you eat." Richard Lewis had an amazing eating disorder where he did not eat. He would go over to Bristol Farms, get 2 quarts of ice cream, granola, and milk, put the ice cream into the granola with some bananas, eat the ice cream, spit it out back into the bowl, and let the sugar run down his throat. He was emaciated all the time. He was proud to be emaciated. He looked like a Dachau survivor. And I think that's the part of the mental, psychological craziness of anorexia. And it originally started for him, according to him, um, by trying to look thin on TV, like every other actress in LA. And he was just insane about food. We went to Greenblatt's one time, and I look at him. He's putting about 50 equals on something. The packets of equal 50 to 75 packets. And I look under the table and there's all the empties. And I said, Richard, why are you putting them all on the floor? And he said, I don't want anybody to see me with these packets. And I said, but somebody's got to clean that up, bro. And he wasn't concerned about that. He was more concerned about his image with these 75 packages of equal being put onto his food. He was really into, I want to say, Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton, he campaigned a lot for Bill Clinton. And I think at the very end, whenever the last night of Bill Clinton's career as a president, Richard Lewis visited him in the White House. And I'm mentioning this because of the house. In Lewis's house on Laurel Canyon, there was a photo of him leaning into Bill Clinton in the photo, and Bill Clinton laughing with his head back, just laughing uproariously. And I said, "What joke did you tell him?" And he said, "It wasn't a joke. I told Bill Clinton that the girl I'm with, I'm dumping her tomorrow, and I don't want her in the frame. So can you please squish in closer to me so I can box her out of the frame of the photo?" And Clinton is just laughing uproariously. And in the left side of the frame, you see whoever that girl was, her elbow in the frame. And I never forgot that. It was really hysterical. Um, Richard also had a thing where he'd speak to you on the phone, and when it was near the end of the conversation, he would tell a joke and you'd laugh and he'd hang up while you were laughing. It became quite infuriating, so I started to do it to him. Um, and try to help him with any way I could. I mean, I used to tell him jokes, and there were things that he loved. Like I told him that my mother was in the Lords of Flatbush, and he would say the gang or the movie, and I would say the gang. And this was a running joke that we had for 20 years. And it was a true story. My mother was in the Lords of Flatbush, the gang, not the movie, but he couldn't believe it. So he would ask me that all the time. Another joke that he loved was that Hitler was in a bungalow colony in the Catskills, and they had an announcement, which they used to do for people who were receiving telephone calls. And over the PA all the time, you would hear telephone call for Hitler, Hitler, telephone, bungalow 12. And I would just say that to him, and he would just crack up laughing. It was one of just these things that he just found to be enormously funny. One time he told me this thing where he was in his kitchen. And oh no, I called him up and he was in his kitchen, and he told me this thing afterwards that bees had come in through the kitchen window from a beehive that was underneath the eave outside the kitchen window, and they were biting him and stinging him. And while this was happening, he didn't know who to call, like the bee patrol or the bee police or whatever. The phone rings and it's Albert Brooks. And he says Richard Lewis says, I'm under attack by a bunch of bees. And Albert Brooks doesn't care. And he says, throw a bucket of honey on the roof and meet me at Greenblatt's in 20 minutes. And I never forgot that line. It's one of the funniest lines I've ever heard. Albert Brooks, obviously a genius. We'll do an episode on Albert Brooks at one point. And his brother, Bob Einstein, who was also in Curb Your Enthusiasm. Now, in 1999, Richard gets a call from a guy named Larry David. And he says, I'm doing a pilot for a show called Curb Your Enthusiasm. And I was wondering if you could be in it. So Richard says, well, I don't want to do cameos. I want an arc for a character. And I want you to agree to that. Here's a picture of the two of them. So the first year that Richard Lewis does this, he does it for scale. And he's actually in episode one, season one, where Larry David has a pair of corduroy pants, and it's called the Pants Tent for Curb Your Enthusiasm aficionados. And his corduroy pants looks like he has a boner, but he doesn't. It's just a fold in the crotch of the pants. And he goes to the theater, and he's going to the movie theater. He's supposed to meet Richard Lewis and his new girlfriend. And there's a girl there sitting on the aisle who won't let him pass. And he gets into a fight with her. It turns out to be Richard Lewis's new girlfriend. And they don't hit it off. But the episode and the season is the first, and Richard Lewis is in a number of them. And he worked for scale for the first season. And the beginning of season two, I'm just trying to remember this. He called me up and he said, I am going to demand my fair share of money for season two. And I said, Richard, whatever you do, don't get into a fight with Larry David over this. You just got back in his good graces. Let your agents handle this. This is not your thing. And he wouldn't do it. He went to the set like day one of season two, got into a fight with Larry David and stormed off over money. And called me up and he's saying, why didn't you stop me? I go, I told you not to do it. But anyway, they eventually repaired this rift and worked out a financial settlement over it. But he was really strung out over the fact that he wouldn't lend him the $1 million. But anyway, his father, Bill Lewis, apparently the name that they came over with, Bill Lewis was his legitimate name, as was Richard Lewis's legitimate legal name. But the real name of the family, going back to Ellis Island, was Lipchansky. And when he married Joyce Lipinski, I would just say to him all the time, going, Mr. Lipchansky marries Mrs. Lipinski. I just kept saying it over and over again. It was the funniest thing I've ever heard to me. And I don't know if he found it funny, but I found it very funny. And I remember going to his house to pick him up, to take him to a Dodger game. And I'm wearing my Dodger uniform, and I go to the door, and he looks at me like I'm from another planet. And he is wearing his black padded Armani cape-like jacket, black, I want to say breaker, wrap pants with billowing MC Hammer billows on them, his black shirt. And I'm going, me? I said, look what you look like. So the two of us drive to Dodger Stadium together, me looking like a fan with the Dodger uniform on, and him looking like Zorro, the gay Blade. And we get to the stadium, and he says, I can't sit still here. I have to walk around and get some acknowledgement. I go, what? And he was so demented that he felt that he had to walk around the stadium to get acknowledgement from the fans. He did it twice during one game. Then he tried to get into the press booth to talk to Vin Scully, his idol. And I said, Richard, he's not going to let you in. He's calling the game. He's not going to, it's not like somebody's living room where you just visit him. And he went and disappeared for like 30 minutes. I don't know what happened to him. And he came back and humorously said under his breath, anti-Semite, which I thought was pretty funny. But he had the overwhelming need to be acknowledged by his fans wherever he went. I was at a game and Joyce was with him. I was there and they had the kiss cam. And on the kiss cam, all of a sudden, they put up Richard and his wife, Joyce. And instead of kissing her like a normal person, he starts mugging for the camera, making faces and doing comedy bits for the camera. And the audience, which is the Dodger fans, begin to boo him. And Joyce looks at me and she says, "Mark, what is wrong with him?" I said, "You're asking me? You married him." And he never kissed her during the kiss cam. And the crowd just booed vociferously against Richard Lewis. I don't even think he knew why they were booing. It was just some of the things he was so tone deaf to. But the Curb things, he will do 45 episodes of Curb, by the way, until the bitter end. He was literally there at the end in a wheelchair for the final season, barely able to stand up. And some of the episodes he took from lives of our own friends. There was an episode he did where he's got to give Larry David a kidney. And yeah, that's at the end, near the end. That might have been the last year. There's an episode where I think it was season 5, where he's got to give Larry David a kidney. Now, this came from a true story because Dallas Taylor was a friend of ours, and this was the drummer for Crosby, Stills and Nash, and he needed a kidney, and he called up his estranged son, Dallas Jr., who laughed maniacally and slammed the phone down. And this episode with Larry David and the kidney from Richard Lewis becomes a similar tone to where Richard Lewis expects Larry David to give him the kidney. Um, there's also an episode where Richard Lewis's parrot dies, and we had a crackhead friend named Dean, who's the crack smoke killed his parrot, and we thought that was funny. And Richard Lewis attacks Larry David in the episode for not feeling the grief that Richard Lewis is feeling for his dead parrot. So a lot of this stuff came out of real life. A lot of the episodes. Um, at one point, Joyce asked me if I could talk Richard Lewis out of his 1980s wardrobe. This is in the 2000s, and he would wear these heavily padded Armani jackets that were so out of fashion. He looked like he was, in Paris in 1984. And she asked me if I could help. I said, "There's no way." So at one point we were at a Dodger game, and I said, "Richard, you got to get rid of those shoulder pads. I can't see the pitchers warming up in the bullpen." Mocking jokes like that, and still to no avail. He still wore the same outfits, and he, I think he liked them because it built up his shoulders, and made him look a little bit bigger than. And underneath, apparently, anorexic people will wear oversized clothing to look bigger than they really are because underneath they're kind of emaciated. Yeah, this is a portrait for Laugh Factory. Yeah. Yeah, he's still wearing the shoulder pads right there. That's great. Yeah, this is, he wouldn't give it up. He wouldn't give it up. But yeah, I mean, he was also the guy who came up with the obsession for the phrase "from hell." And it wasn't until 2006 that the Yale Book of Quotations gave him credit for the phrase "date from hell," "restaurant from hell," "show from hell." However, he battled with Bartlett's Book of Quotations for 10 years over the fact that Bartlett's would not acknowledge "from hell," and Bartlett's, he would send them videos of him using "from hell" in performance, and Bartlett would write back the editorial staff saying, "We found a reference in 1962 or 1948, where someone said 'from hell.'" And they would deny him until 2006 when the Yale Book of Quotations succumbed. Richard Lewis had rosacea. And one time I came to his house and he opened the door and he had white cream all over his face and a million acupuncture pins in his face, looking like remember the movie Hellraiser? That's what this guy would do with these acupuncture things. Take a look at this. This is what Richard Lewis looked like to me that day. But but there's no white cream. And he didn't have the white. This guy doesn't have the white cream on that Richard did. And Richard, he was taking Valium for it and whatever. It was nervous. It was a nervous disorder, which is what rosacea is from anxiety. And he would try to help all kinds of people. Like I don't know if he told you the story, but he sent me to the Bill Maher show and he told the people there to hire me as a writer. So I went over to the show, got into this thing where you have to do the panel with Bill Maher rehearsal on a Thursday night um, with two of the writers posing as uh, the guests, and you would run through it with a live audience. And I was Ariana Huffington, and they wouldn't answer if I was supposed to be Ariana Huffington, act like Ariana Huffington, or her political views. The whole thing was rather vague, and also not really legal regarding the Writers Guild. However, he Bill Maher came out. He looked like he was hungover as hell, and I cracked a couple of jokes and the audience broke up laughing and Bill Maher was just glaring at me. I don't know if I was supposed to crack jokes. It was in answer to his questions. It was about hydrogen cars or something that Ariana Huffington was into at the time. And he said, "How are we going to get um, hydrogen?" And I said, "Well, we're going to have to invade countries with a lot of hydrogen." And, I just said it off the top of my head. The audience just started roaring and he started glaring. And after the show was over, now keep in mind, Richard Lewis sent me there. I wouldn't have gone there in a million years, but I thought the fix was in. And Richard Lewis sent me there, and everybody walks away from me afterwards like I was kryptonite, and they give me a gift basket. I get into a freight elevator in the back of the studio at CBS on Beverly, and the freight elevator gate opens up, and it's Bill Maher. And he's glaring at me still. I don't even know what it means. And he said, "How did you get here?" And I said, "Richard Lewis sent me." And he said, "A lot of good that did you." And he walks off the elevator. And that was the end of that. Another time, Richard Lewis sent me to the Daily Show in New York. And I don't have to go into it, but essentially, it was the same result. Um, and he meant well, but the people who were the recipients didn't give a shit. Um, to my demise, I had to go do all these things because he insisted that the fix was in, and the fix was never in, which was kind of the joke. At one point, I wrote a script called "The Last Man on Earth." It was a comedy, and supposed to star Richard Lewis, but Richard Lewis was not the original choice. I think there was a couple of choices before him, including Will Ferrell, who was still at SNL at the time, and this guy on the right, Will Forte, must have found the script, which was sent to Will Farrell by my agent. And mine was a feature film, and they starring Richard Lewis and set in Manhattan. And it was supposed to be like Janine Garofalo and then some supermodel. It's like three people together in the film. And somehow this guy got a hold of it or got the idea and took it to Fox. They made it into a series at Fox. And anyway, so I didn't care because I'd been ripped before. But Richard Lewis went crazy and he wanted to sue everybody on the face of the earth. And I said, "Richard, you don't know how these things work. I've been there. You have to prove all these different things. It's just not worth it, bro." But he just got obsessed with being the last man on earth. And he wouldn't let it go. He didn't do anything about it ultimately, but man, oh man, was he obsessed about being in this movie, which never got made. Um, but yeah, he would latch onto things like a junkyard dog, and he would just get obsessed about a lot of stuff. Let me put it that way. But he wrote a book, and he sent me this book. I don't know which one it is. The hardcover book, which is it's called the other. Yeah, this is the one here. This is the other Great Depression. I think it came out in like 2005 ish, if I remember correctly. And the inscription on the inside, I just looked at these. I hadn't looked at these just for the episodes. I just opened these up. I didn't know these were in here. Um, and this is from this particular thing. Again, it's this Joe Ancis reference for people who don't know who Joe Ansis was. He was a friend of Rodney's and Lenny. This is, I guess, 2008, it says up there, right? Hollywood. So he sent me that one, but he would also send me these notes all the time. He would give me notes. This is from 2001. Okay. When I stop laughing at your amazing wit, I'll be in deep shit, or maybe worse. Last Man on Earth. Yeah, that's Richard Lewis. I love you. Please don't screw me. Oh, this is when it was still alive, I guess. Yeah, this is 2001, right? This was the hardcover book that came out. And that was the inscription he put in the book. Yeah, this is him at Book Soup on Sunset Boulevard here in Hollywood for the signing of the book. I wasn't there, but he gave me a copy and forced me to read it. And there's something I wanted to. Where is this book? Let me see where I could find this. Oh, here it is. Uh, this is the yeah, that one right there. There is something in the back which I hadn't read or known. It says about the author in the back of the book, and it says here, um, as part of his description, it says making great use of his personal style. He's played himself true to life as one of Larry David's closest friends in the Seinfeld co-creators hit HBO series Curb Your Enthusiasm since 2001, to much acclaim. And it says, at an event honoring a fellow icon, one reviewer wrote, quote, melting the house and forcing grown men to weep openly, Richard Lewis bombarded the crowd from one obtuse comedy angle after another. For nearly 20 minutes, he induced nonstop howling for every living, breathing thing in the house, which is absolutely true on that particular night. And I know it because those are my words. I wrote that review. And the fellow icon that he's talking about, that he doesn't even mention, is the legendary Mort Saul. And it was Mort Saul's 80th birthday that all of these comics showed up to perform. And the fact that he doesn't mention me is okay, but I don't mind that. But the fact that he doesn't mention Mort Saul just shows you the wonderful insecurities of Richard Lewis, that he can't mention another comic in the quote. But the reality of it is, oh yeah, there's just a lot of notes and stuff that was stuffed in these books that I started to find in there. He's up for the Bill Russell story. I don't even know what he's talking about in these notes because they're so they're so dated. This one I don't know. Something about blue nails. He had like blue nail polish on. I was mocking him. There's another one. Um, this one here. I'm sorry, but I was insecure about my share with my suicide pal. Plus, you taunted me 1,046 times about my 1980s wardrobe. Oh, love Richard. P.S. The Yankees have no pitching. Um, I miss him, and I miss him as a Jew. I miss him as an East Coast friend. I miss him as a comedy buddy. I miss him as a guy who knew sports inside and out. I miss him as a guy who I could go to a baseball game with and hang out with. I miss him um, just going over to his house in that comedy museum house of his. I miss seeing him in clubs. There's a lot of stuff that you take for granted. And when these people pass away, the people in show business, and they have a lot of footage of themselves on TV, I think it's hard to grieve because you still see them. Um, there's no closure. It's almost like they're still alive in a lot of ways. And he, this is just a year ago. So it's really fresh in my mind about Richard Lewis passing. And like 2 years before that, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. But the Parkinson's was being treated by dopamine, but it was hard for him to walk around, and he would freeze in a particular pose while walking. And then unfreeze. It was like one of the symptoms of Parkinson's. But Parkinson's, I don't think, is what killed him. He was 76 years old, and he died of a heart attack in his sleep in L.A. here last year. And I believe, and this is just me, I believe it was because of untreated anorexia. And I think like 85% of anorexics die from heart attacks. The muscle that's left after your body eats up the muscle mass in your body, the last muscle left is the heart. And that's why so many of them die of heart attacks at the end, almost 100%. And I think you could live with Parkinson's. What's his name? Back to the Future is living with it, and many people. I mean, Ali had Parkinson's for many years. Muhammad Ali was also a hero. Richard Lewis, by the way, he loved Muhammad Ali, and but he was 76, and he had done a lot of damage. He had done a lot of drugs. He had done a lot of drinking. Um, so maybe it took its toll on his heart, but he still, he still lived to the ripe age of 76. He didn't get cheated on that. He would later in his life take his own mother to therapy. Um, she ended up in a nursing home down in Florida with Alzheimer's, and he would go in and try to talk to her. But one of my favorite Richard Lewis stories was he moves to LA and he had to leave his group therapy. And the therapist would mail him an audio cassette of the session from the week before. And he would sit down in his kitchen and listen to his own group therapy, which he was no longer attending. And a girl started sobbing hysterically about some incident in her life. And she started sobbing and yelling and doing stuff. And he couldn't hear her because she was too far away from the microphone. And all of a sudden, the therapist says to her, "Would you mind getting a little closer to the mic? We're recording this for Richard Lewis in LA." And he was so embarrassed that he left the group therapy, and he physically had left it anyway. But he was so embarrassed that he never received any of the audio tapes again. As crazy as that sounds, I always thought that was one of the great therapy stories of all time. But he was always in therapy. He always had a woman therapist. He reinvigorated his relationship with Larry David, obviously, and as you saw in the Larry Charles episode, Larry David, Richard Lewis would show up with notes hidden in his pockets, and Larry Charles told me that he'd have to frisk Richard Lewis to take the notes away from him so he wouldn't use the notes as a crutch. If you follow what I'm saying, he would tuck these notes, bullet points again, into pockets. And Larry Charles said, who was directing Curb, would search Richard Lewis and take away the notes. A lot of these episodes are connected, folks. So if you haven't seen all of them, you may miss a couple of interconnecting stories. But yeah, I mean, he was unbelievably marvelous on Curb, and um, the line from season 2, episode 4, "You're a shrimp thief." When Larry David was stealing his shrimp, would go down in history. And also, like I said, the kidney story where he's just yelling at Larry David saying, "I'm dying," in a comic way, but also true for the episode, was also immortal in a lot of ways. Um, yeah, I mean, he had a full life. I mean, from beginning to end, and I don't know if he was ever at peace with himself. I don't know if he ever found the solace that he wanted. I know he had a belief in God. I know he didn't completely like organized religion. He looked at himself as more of a secular Jew, like many people do in that area. But he did give up drinking, and I think he stopped probably in 1995, and that should go in the Richard Lewis Hall of Fame for achieving that greatness of not drinking again in show business, which is not so easy. Um, I was we were at a game one time, and he's telling jokes, We're in box seats. He's telling these jokes, goes out, and these old guys who owned that box said, "What do you have to do to make this guy shut up?" And I said, "Do you know who that is?" And they said, "No." I said, "It's Richard Lewis." And they said, "We don't know who Richard Lewis is, but you got to get this guy to shut the fuck up. Otherwise, we're calling the usher." And I'm going like, what do I do now? How do I stop Richard Lewis from riffing in the box seat? But these old guys didn't want to hear him. What a dilemma. He came back and they left to tell you the answer to the predicament. But I didn't have the heart to tell him that these two non-fans were not happy with his riffing about the Dodger Pirate game that particular day. But I think the sex manual he always wanted to write had a fictitious title of "Ow, You're on My Hair," and I always wanted him to write that book. That would have been very funny. That would have been very funny. He was paranoid about everything. He once told me that he had a rear view mirror on a stationary bike. I mean, think about that. Yeah, well, might have missed it. How did you meet Richard? Through mutual friends. Inside getting sober in Hollywood. That was the beginning of our relationship, and I think it was around 1996. So it lasted a long time. But yeah, I met him trying to help him get sober. What else can I answer for you people if you have any questions out there? Let's see. We've been doing this. Richard was from the next town over I grew up. Why did he always wear black? Okay. Al, welcome, Al. He always wore black so he would look thinner on TV. He was obsessed about not looking fat on television, and he wore black for two reasons. One, he thought it looked cool. One, he saw Lenny Bruce wearing black, and the third thing was to appear thinner on television, if that answers the question. But he's not alone in that. I mean, there are a lot of actors and actresses are obsessed about being on television, and because it can add like 10 pounds to your face, 10 or 15 pounds, the lighting and stuff like that. But yeah, Englewood, New Jersey, was actually where he grew up. I don't know how far Al was from there, but he wore the black, and he was the Prince of Pain. And I think it was to make himself look thinner. That was always my guess. Although earlier in his career, when he wasn't as Meshuggah, he wore all different kinds of colors, but you have to go pretty far back in his career. Let's see what we got here. Alan, hope you're going to make it to Texas in a couple of months, Alan. And thank you for your donation from up near Poughkeepsie, New York. I don't know, Richard. Richard probably played everywhere. When he went on vacation, he never went on vacation. He would stay. His dream was not to travel for a vacation and just stay in his own house because he traveled so much on the road. So he would stay at home and just play music and stay in his house and not go on the road. That was his idea of a vacation. I know Al from the book of yeah, that's the same people. Yeah, so Richard Lewis. Maybe we got some audio we could play of Richard Lewis on the Stern Show with Sam Kinison. There's a little snippet. I thought maybe we can throw that up here at this time for people to actually hear.
And loves Richard Lewis.
Already a career into
there you go.
A successful television career with the Jamie Hooters Curtis.
Jamie Hooters Curtis.
Oh my God, dude!
Sam, good to see you.
Sam, I want Sam to get a mic and
yeah, sit down.
Who
Sit
loves you more
down.
than me?
No one.
Hey, would you lose weight or something?
God,
Seriously?
Yeah, on Nutrisystem. Is it time for the Nutrisystem commercial?
Not yet. We're into video smarts. And there's no way Sam's going to be able to cope with video
I'm
smarts.
telling you.
Hey, I heard some nasty rumors.
Hey, sit down. Sit down.
Hey,
Nasty rumors.
we'll get into all that.
Wait. Sit down.
We
Sit
gotta
down. We got a
finish
lot.
the commercial.
We got
I'm going to go into the fetal position now. Take care.
Go ahead. Just come on. Hang in
I
there.
don't know how.
Hang in there
I
with
get
us.
shy.
Hang in there with
around
us.
Sam.
It's going to be okay.
Hey, Sam, do me a favor. Can you sit in that chair?
Yeah.
Hey, can you guys switch chairs?
I bring somebody. You make
Yeah,
him
right.
sit like a psycho in the back.
Yeah,
and he
why don't we
brings
have that
someone.
guy just kind of move
Who
toward
is
the back?
this guy?
Yeah.
We both brought hitmen.
Who is that guy, Sam?
It's opening act, Dan Barton.
How you doing, Dan? You might just it's kind of hard to get you on mic otherwise. All
I
right.
think I didn't bring Mitchell.
How you doing, Dan? What, you got rid of Mitchell?
No, I could have brought Mitchell.
Yeah. Well, Mitchell's annoying, so it's good you brought him.
Mitchell means
Can I see your rings for 1 second, Sam?
yes.
Oh,
The girls did this to me since our last thing. I've
Saw
been
them in the
branded
Omen
now.
movies.
I know, but they did this to me since our last interlude.
What'd you do? You painted your nail black?
Well, I saw what's a pit.
Agassi does that.
Right? So,
No, he's got a black nail?
Yeah.
doesn't
Sam,
that
let me
look
see
cool?
that.
though?
One of them?
Yeah,
Let's
doesn't
see.
that look scary? It's like, shake
Trust
my
me.
hand. Yeah. The girls did the same thing. That's what the big thing is. It's all just to make people go, "What's
Wait a
that
minute.
about?"
It's like a bonding
You think
thing.
the
You know, the
black
two
nail
sisters
is...
Well, that goes on for quite a long time with Richard Lewis and Sam Kinison on the Stern Show. That was from 1989. I'm going to try to get thank you, James. I said earlier my favorite joke was the one of his mother jangling the change for the Golden Gate Bridge in their driveway in New Jersey before taking a coast-to-coast summer vacation. I always loved that joke, but there's quite a few of them. I mean, but that was always my favorite. He had the innate ability to be able to tell these jokes as if he was saying them off the top of his head. And I don't know how he did it. He just had enough road and performance experience where it seemed like the jokes were simply flowing out of him and did not seem like rat-tat-tat beginning, middle, and end jokes of Rodney Dangerfield and Shecky Green and Buddy Hackett and everyone else. He was able to massage the jokes to make it seem like dialogue. And that was his superpower. He also, like I said, he had notes that he referred to on the stage that he would put on a piano or on the floor. It did help him focus. It wasn't like the actual jokes themselves. They were just bullet points. But he would have a million of them on a list and try to get through as many as he could. Divining was in Jason Miller as a young priest. I don't know what that's about. Or Jason Patrick. I don't know what that's about either. But nevertheless, he is one of the greats of all time. I had put together, I think Comedy Central did a top 100, and he was 45th on the list of Comedy Central's top 100. I did a list that was published, and ironically, I put him as number 8, which was he heavy at one point or what? No. It's got nothing to do with that. It's not about weight. It's about perceived dysmorphic body image. It's what you perceive your image to be. It's not actually that you're fat or skinny or anything like that. It's far more psychological than that. But I did a list of the top 100 comedians for publication in the 90s or 2000s, and Richard on my list turned out to be number 8. And he would mock me all the time saying, how do I move up the list to get into the top 5? I said, Richard, it's printed. I'm not altering the list. And he said, you can alter it. It's online. You could get in there. And he would just drive me insane about moving him up from 8 to like 4 or 5. Oh, he wanted to get in the top 5. And the list, if I can remember correctly, was Lenny, Pryor, Woody, Mort Saul was number 4. Buddy Hackett was 5. Carlin was 6. Eddie Murphy was 7. And Richard Lewis was 8 on that list. And I thought that was pretty fair. And he thought it was fair too. He was just mocking me to try to move up the list. And I thought that was rather funny. I never changed the list. And it's all completely subjective. I mean, what we did was we attached video clips to each of the 100 ones that were on there so people could go down the list and watch these videos. I think Rodney was 10 on there. And I forget who was number 9. Oh, Robin was number 9. Anyway, it's totally subjective stuff, but the reality, I felt that he was in the top 10 is the point I'm trying to make. I thought that Richard Lewis had mastered the actual art of stand-up comedy to such a fine-tuned machine where he could come on and not do stand-up on Letterman any longer. He would literally just come on and sit on the couch and do the routines on the couch with Letterman being a straight man. Also, Leno, the same thing. The Tonight Show, he did do stand up and then sit on the couch with Johnny. And he tells these really funny stories where he was on a plane to Paris and Johnny Carson's sitting across from him and he can't help staring at him and he feels like he's stalking him, that he's a freak. Uh, some real fascinating stories of Richard's relationship to show business. But I recommend. I can't recommend. It's too crazy. I can't recommend the book. It's just not a happy read. It's just too freaking neurotic. The book. Oh, thank you, Scott. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Some of this is painful to do because I do miss him, but it's allowing me to dig up old stories that not that I buried them. It's just like you can't. They're just not in the front of your mind that much. And then I started getting into it this week. And more of these stories came back to mind of my relationship to Richard Lewis. Just to, just for my own sake, it's kind of a way to grieve his loss. 12 years ago, I had tickets to my dream show, Gilbert and Richard Lewis, on the bill together, but it got canceled because Lewis broke his arm. Well, that's interesting. He was starting to fall down. And that's why they moved to the Valley, because his house, he took a number of spills and had a number of surgeries. Because of these spills on his staircases in this really tight museum of a house in Laurel Canyon in Hollywood. And his wife, there was no room for her to live in it anyway when she married him in 2005. So they eventually moved out to the Valley, which I never went out there because it's the Valley. I only went to the Richard Lewis Museum House here in Hollywood. And I always wondered what they thought of him at Bristol Farms because he'd show up for that ice cream and granola and milk and banana thing every other day. Okay, so that's let's see, how long have we been doing this? Since 3. It's about an hour and a half on Richard Lewis. We're going to try to find some more audio and put it up on Richard Lewis down below. The Last Man on Earth, Omega Man script. Tell me more about mine or about Omega Man. Like I said, mine was a comedy, and there is a disaster, and there's one man left, and that's Richard Lewis, and he moves into the Plaza Hotel and he gets mannequins and he's living in there and he's driving around New York in a cab. And he goes downtown to 14th Street. He hears some rattle and he goes into a supermarket to get some food and he smashes his cart into a woman who is the second person in the movie. And he begins to go out on dates with her in Manhattan. And she says to him at one point, I wouldn't sleep with you if you were the last man on earth. And he says, why? I am the last man. I could change. I could move downtown. I could get a different cologne. What difference does it make? And she said, I wouldn't sleep with you if you were the last man on earth. And he is completely befuddled. And he says, why? And she finally says, because I'm a lesbian. So now the last man on earth is stuck with this lesbian woman and is completely frustrated. They go bowling together. They watch lesbian porn together. We're trying to remember the script. And they go downtown one day and they hear music coming out of a nightclub. And they go into the nightclub together and they're dancing in the middle of the dance floor is a super hot supermodel by herself. And the plot turns because both of them want her. And so the movie begins to be a love triangle comedy where both the lesbian and Richard Lewis are pursuing the ingenue supermodel as their love interest, if that helps explain the movie. I don't know if Vincent Price is in this movie, but there are a number of Last Man on Earth type movies. But this was my romantic love triangle comedy version of the movie, if that helps explain it. And there, at one point, there were other people attached to it. At one point, I think. Well, I don't have to go into that, but Richard Lewis was the one that I really wanted to be the last man on Earth, where he was just bemoaning the fact that he was the last man on Earth. Okay, so Al is back. Mark, great job tonight. Your series on Gilbert Kinison Lewis with Jackie Marling have been nothing short of superb for us comedy fans. Next week is going to be Andy Kaufman. For you people at home who are wondering what is coming up next, I'm going to do Andy Kaufman. I knew his brother Michael Kaufman. I was in comedy school, if that is such a thing. We were in the National Improvisation Theater, Michael Kaufman and I. So we're going to do Andy Kaufman next week. Latka, for you people who are Yiddish aficionados from Taxi. I made latkes last night for Rosh Hashanah here in my house, so that's kind of fitting. Maybe that's the reason he was on my mind. But we're going to get into Andy Kaufman next week. Eventually, we will do Woody Allen. We will do Robin Williams. We will do Lenny Bruce. We will do Eddie Murphy. We've done George Carlin. I'm going to get into Buddy Hackett at one point, the genius of Buddy Hackett. You never got Andy Kaufman. He was an original troll. Yeah, it's a lot more to it than that. You might want to check out the episode, bro. I don't know if he's an original troll, but also on Fridays, Andy Kaufman was there with Michael Richards and Larry David on Fridays, and Larry Charles. So all of the shows are interconnected in a strange comedy way. We're not going to just stick to comedy. At some point, we're going to do other people like George Hamilton and other show business people that I have known over the years. We're going to do Jackie Gleason. We're going to do Oliver Hardy, Laurel and Hardy. So I got that coming on pretty soon. And we'll do Michael Richards, who I have spoken to before about this. But anyway, okay, so let's see if we have any questions or super chats or anything, because we have a Dodger series against the Diamondbacks that I have to watch and then get ready for the playoffs, which is Tuesday. But I'll be on with Eric on Friday on the other channel for news, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of news. Remember to like and subscribe if you know how to do that. Maybe we could put a manual, like we'll make a video on how to do it with a AI guy pushing the button. Maybe that would help. I don't know who. Bert Convey is not going to make it. I'll tell you that right now. 10K Mosey, welcome to the party, 10K. You're in the right place. I feel like I'm stuffed up. I got a stuffed up nose today. Sorry about that. The weather out here is so weird. It's been humid and hot, which it never is, for like 2.5, 3 weeks, which is really making people kill other people. So, yeah, the Kaufman Elvis impersonation after watching him do Latka on Taxi as a kid. Yeah, he was great doing that Elvis thing, and also the Mighty Mouse thing, and there's a bunch of other things that he did, taking everyone out from, I think, milk and cookies and stuff like that. But Jackie Gleason was a god among comedy. There was nobody bigger than Jackie Gleason, my friend. The Honeymooners and the Jackie Gleason Show, and I waited for Richard. I waited on Richard. He probably didn't need anything. I would bartend parties in West Palm Beach. He gave me grief for being a Michigan fan. Yeah, let me tell you something. He was a huge Ohio State fan. it was almost psychotic. I'm just going like, who cares about? I mean, he was a pro sports guy, but he went to that school, and I know he worked with the Alumni Association to help curb binge drinking on college campuses. I know he was involved in that at Ohio State University, and he uh, did work with the school to kind of curtail binge drinking. I don't know how you do that, but um, apparently was involved in helping Ohio State. Huge Ohio State fan, um, which I guess he went to school there. Scott, again, thank you for torturing people into pushing the like button. I know it's the biggest decision of their lives for a lot of these cats. Um, but yeah, Gleason was a huge legend and also a musical composer. There's a lot of stuff about Gleason we'll get into. Also an alcoholic, like a lot of these people, you know. Yeah, he would never fly. He always took a train. He had fear of flying. But okay, so that's about an hour and a half. I think that's probably enough on Richard, right? What else can we say about him? No, I think that's it. I think we're good here. So let me just. I got to get into this tribal coffee before we leave. This is the coffee of comedy. This is the coffee that makes you funny. See that picture there? It looks like the comedy god right there of tribal coffee is what you're looking at. You get 10% off with the code Mark G, but the tribal coffee comedy god is really what that image is. This is coffee put together by pygmies, apparently in Papua New Guinea, where the pygmies live. But they look. You ever wonder what pygmies did for a living? They have to make a living also. So in the Western Highlands province of Papua New Guinea, these pygmies work with these volcanic ash coffee beans to bring you this incredible product, which I'm holding up right here and drinking now. This is a actual cup of the tribal coffee. Mm. This is really good. I would say try one ground bag, just one. Tell me if you like it. If not, don't ever go back. You get 10% off, so it's not so expensive. It comes right to your door. Use the secret code Mark G. I'm telling you right now, this is not regular coffee. It's not flavored, but it's so smooth and so sweet and so nice that you'll flip out. You'll flip out over this coffee. Again, 10% off with the code Mark G. Tribal coffee. Try the tribal coffee, and I think you will go back for a second bag. But try one. Just try one. I think you'll get hooked. Okay, that's it. We're out of here. Richard Lewis, Secret Life. I hope you learned something about Richard Lewis today. There are a lot of secrets we put in there today, but if anybody has any problems with it, leave a description in the comments section, and we'll try to respond to you during the week. Next week, like I said, we're going to do Andy Kaufman. We'll be back Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this same bat channel and the same bat time for Andy Kaufman.